All right, this is The Love Powder by O. Henry. The Blue Light Drugstore is downtown between the Bowery and First Avenue. The Blue Light is a very serious drugstore. It does not sell candy or chewing gum or soda. It deals in medicines and prescriptions. Mickey Shack was the night clerk of the Blue Light and the friend of many of his customers. At the Blue Light, one seeks more than mere medicine. There, one asks aid and advice and assistance, and Mickey's words of wisdom were warmly welcomed. Mickey lived and ate dinners at Mrs. Riddle's boarding house 2 blocks away. Mrs. Riddle had a daughter named Rosie, and as you may have guessed, Mickey adored her. To him, she was the sun and the moon and all the stars in the heavens. But Mickey was timid, and his hopes remained frozen in fear. Behind his counter, he was confident and calm, the master of his trade. Away from the store, he was weak kneed and hesitant. Faint hearted and shy, he lacked the courage to tell Rosie. To add to his problem, there was Chunk McGowan. Chunk also roomed at the Riddles and was crazy about Rosie. At the same time, he was Mickey's friend and customer, and often dropped in at the Blue Light to have a cut or bruise treated after a playful sidewalk scuffle. One afternoon, McGowan drifted in his easy way and sat good natured upon a stool. Mickey, he said to his friend behind the counter, there's an item I need if you can make it for me. Mickey stared at Chunk's face, searching hard for the signs of the usual wounds. Where's the injury? He asked. Mr. McGowan smiled. The trouble, he said, has to do with my heart. Say, Mickey, Rosie and me are going to run away and get married tonight. Mickey's eyes opened wide. That is, continued Chuck, the smile fading from his face, if she doesn't change her mind before the time comes. We've been making plans for the great event for the past 2 weeks. One day she says she will. The same evening she says no. We've agreed on tonight, and Rosie stuck to that for 2 days in a row, but there are still 5 hours to go, and I'm afraid that she'll back out at the very last minute. You said there was an item you needed from me, remarked Mickey slowly. Mr. McGowan looked ill at ease, a condition quite unusual for him. I wouldn't have this foul up for anything in the world, he went on. I've rented a little apartment uptown with flowers on the table and a kettle ready to boil, and I've hired a preacher to marry us at his house at 9:30 sharp. Our plan's got to work, and it will. If Rosie doesn't change her mind again, Mr. McGowan shook his head sadly, troubled by his doubts. I still don't see yet, said Mickey shortly, what it is that you want of me, or what I can be doing about that. Old man Riddle doesn't know me, don't like me at all, McGowan continued. For a week now, he hasn't let Rosie step outside the door with me. If they could afford to lose a boarder, he'd have bounced me out a long time ago. I think the world of her, and she'll never regret flying the coop with Chuck McGowan. You will excuse me, Chunk, said Mickey. I must make up something that is to be picked up soon. Say, said McGowan, looking up suddenly. Say, Mickey, isn't there some kind of powder, a love powder, that'll make a girl like you better if you give it to her? Mickey's lip curled with scorn at this foolish idea, but before he could answer, Chunk went on. Yes, a love powder. Mickey, that's what I need. Strong and simple was Chuck McGowan, a better judge of men than Mickey would have seen that Chunk's tough frame was strung on delicate wires. Like a good general in a foreign territory, he was trying to guard every path against possible failure. I thought, went on Chunk hopefully, that if I had one of them love powders to give Rosie when I see her at supper tonight, it might brace her up a bit, keep her from backing out on her plan to skip. I guess she doesn't need a team of mules to drag her away, but I'd like to make sure. If the stuff works for a couple hours, it'll do the trick. When is this foolishness of running away supposed to happen? Asked Mickey. 9 o'clock, said Mr. McGowan. Supper's at 7. At 8, Rosie says she has a bad headache and goes to bed. At 9, I slip into Riddle's backyard through the space where there's a board office fence. I go under Rosie's window and help her down the fire escape. It's got to go off like clockwork so we can get to the preacher on time. It's all dead easy if Rosie doesn't back out. Can you fix me one of them love powders, Mickey? Mickey shook his head thoughtfully. Chunk, he said, it is with drugs of that nature that a druggist might take the greatest of care. To you alone, all of my acquaintances, would I trust a powder such as the one you ask, but for you I shall make it, and you shall see the power it has. Mickey went behind the counter. There he crushed a powder of a tiny tablet of morphine. To that he added a little sugar to increase the bulk. Then he folded the mixture neatly in a white paper. Taken by an adult, this powder would produce several hours of deep sleep without dangers to the sleeper. Then he handed to Chunk McGowan, telling him this he handed to Chunk McGowan, telling him to use it as a liquid if possible, in a liquid if possible. McGowan offered his hearty thanks and departed with his treasure. How very clever was Mickey's plan, for no sooner had Chunk left than the druggist reached for the telephone. He quickly informed Mr. Riddle of Chuck's plan for eloping with Rosie. Mr. Riddle was a man with a very quick temper. Much obliged, she said briefly to Mickey. We'll just see about Chunk McGowan. My room's right above Rosie's. I'll go up there after supper and load the shotgun and wait. If he comes in my backyard, he'll go away looking for a doctor instead of a preacher. With Rosie deep in sleep and her angry parent waiting and armed, Mickey felt sure that Chunk McGowan would soon be out of the picture. All night in the Blue Light drugstore, Mickey waited for some news of the disaster, but no news came. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the day clerk arrived, and Mickey started hurriedly for Mrs. Riddle's to learn the outcome. Just as he stepped out of the store, who but Chunk McGowan sprang across the street and grasped his hand. Chuck McGowan with a smile of victory and bursting with joy. Went off without a hitch, said Chunk with an enormous grin. Rosie hit the fire escape on time to the second, and we made it to the preacher's at 9:30 on the nose. She's up at the apartment now. We had eggs this morning. How lucky I am. You must drop by some day and have dinner with us, Mickey. I've got a job down near the bridge, and that's where I'm heading for now. The love powder? Stammered Mickey. Oh, that stuff you gave me? Said Chunk, his grin growing even wider. Well, it was this way. I sat down at the supper table last night at Riddle's, and I looked at Rosie, and I said to myself, Chunk, if you're going to marry Rosie, do it fair and square. Don't try any nonsense with a gem like her. So I kept the powder you gave me in my pocket, and then my eyes fell on another person present, someone who could show a little more affection to his future son-in-law. So I watched for my chance and dumped that love powder into old man Riddle's coffee. See?